I hope so.
Great. So regulation crowdfunding. We're looking at the screen and it says there's types of offerings for regulation crowdfunding, this brand new regulation. Rick, take us away.
It is my pleasure. Thank you, Joseph. I'm not sure if I heard the entire introduction. However, there's been a lot of chatter on the street, both from Wall Street and Main Street. Wall Street questioning the efficacy of crowdfunding and what can it be used. And then, of course, Main Street can't wait to have it done. On the screen, you see several types of instances where businesses potentially could use crowdfunding. We could see it in emerging growth businesses that need to create some enterprise value and might raise equity so they have some ability to go out and do banking and do accounts receivable financing. Specific real estate investments. This might be used for your small real estate investments where you're buying a small apartment building and need the down payment to move forward and do some acquisitions. You might see it in a community business type of situation, like a restaurant who wants to expand to another site and wants to raise money from its current customers whom they have received emails for many years. You might see it for a medical device, a drug, or a small pharmaceutical company.
You know, Rick, one of the things that we learned in the Title II and Title IV, especially Title II of crowdfunding, you know, where folks started migrating online, was that the original thought was that it would be used for startup businesses, two guys in a garage with a great idea. And we found that it started to be used for lots and lots of other things. Based on your types of offers here, is your expectation that the regulation crowdfunding will be equally used across the assets and for lots of things other than just a pure startup company?
Absolutely. In fact, I think that's what you're going to see. When you come down to the bottom, you still have to appeal to the crowd and have something to sell them. I think you'll be seeing a lot of the more traditional startups staying on Kickstarter and Indiegogo in the premium type of crowdfunding situations. But real businesses, I think, will be able to use this to raise up to $1 million. And that gets us onto the this next slide that deals with the elements of Section 4A6. We're not going to go into detail as to code section or regulation sections, but this is the section of the Securities Act of 1933 that mentions this particular exemption. It allows.
So real quickly, Rick, just for the geeks out there, is that normally we've been talking about Reg D offerings, 506Bs and 506Cs, and so regulation crowdfunding has been amended into the law and is part of what is called Section 4A6. Is that correct?
That is correct.
All right. So now the new insiders that are on our conference call right now, all of those new insiders know that they can look really smart by saying the phrase, "Oh, Section 4A6 offer," and what can it do?
Yeah, or what we will call it now is regulation crowdfunding, but we're going to call it Reg CF.
Good.
And by the way, the safe harbor under these Reg D offerings comes under Section 4A2. So they're both under the exempt offering sections of the 33 Act. In essence, it gives the ability for an issuer to raise up to $1 million in a 12-month period. So it's a rolling 12-month period, not a calendar year. Some people have asked, can you do a Reg D offering along with a Reg CF offering? The answer is absolutely yes. The only caveat is that if you're concurrently doing it with a 506B offering, 506B offerings don't allow general solicitation, so you have to be very careful in segregating them. And also you can concur it with a 506C offering that allows general solicitation, but again, the general solicitation rules under Reg D are different than the general solicitation rules under Reg CF. Joseph, will we be able to handle that on our platform for CommunityLeader?
Yep, so CommunityLeader's platform is currently configured to be able to support multiple different offerings of different exemption types. So currently on the platform, you could do a Reg 506B and a Regulation D 506C concurrently. It sets up different login, registration, and view requirements for the different investors, and it supports different types of solicitation. So our clients that would like to run portals that are eligible to do both Regulation D and Regulation CF offerings will have that as an opportunity.
Wonderful. The next point is investors in a 12-month period have certain limitations as the amount they can invest in all similarly situated Reg CF transactions within a 12-month period. There's two striations. The first is those people who have net worth or income less than $100,000, and those people are limited to the greater of $2,000 or 5% of the lesser of the net worth or income. For those people who have both net worth and income in excess of $100,000, they are limited to 10% of the lesser of the net worth or income, but they can invest more than $100,000 in a 12-month period. What's interesting here is this is a deviation from the proposed regulations that said the greater of net worth or income. I can give a few interesting examples. You could have an accredited investor out there who meets either the $1 million net worth test or the $200,000 income test for the last 2 years and for the current year. In that particular case, if one of those factors, the net worth or the income factor, is less than $100,000, he's limited to investing the greater of $2,000 or 5% of the lesser, which is kind of an interesting outcome because you would think accredited investors could invest anything they want. What the other part that's interesting, yes, Joseph. Okay. The other fact that comes into this particular point is that an investor will self-accreditate. In other words, he will, when he signs in to the website or the platform, he will tell the intermediary, which is the funding portal or broker-dealer, which we will get into, and the issuer, that he meets these particular tests. However, Joseph, will we be able to provide to our intermediaries a way to validate the income and net worth requirements?
You know, that's a great question. I want to pick up, I heard Craig whispering and try to ask one of the questions from our online attendees, whether you'll be able to run a concurrent crowdfunding regulation and a Reg A offering for the same company at the same time. And Rick, do you have a kind of a sense on, I'm not sure why that would make sense, but could you have a simultaneous offering or two different offerings running concurrently, doing a Reg A and a Reg CF offering?
Well, I know for sure you can. A 34 Act company is not eligible to use Reg CF. There's been no mention of whether or not a Reg A offering or somebody wants to use Reg A cannot use it. So as far as I know at this particular point, you could do both, but again, you would have problems, particularly if you're using a broker-dealer who's got advertising rules, and you're going to have advertising on both of these, and you're going to have to create a Chinese wall to make sure that one offering doesn't violate certain sections and regulations governing the other offering.
Yeah, I think as we learn more about regulation crowdfunding, you'll see that there's very specific requirements about how it can be marketed and advertised. And if you restricted your Reg A marketing and advertising to that model, it would not be in your best interest, especially on the cost and time for incurring to do a Regulation A. So it sounds as though you probably could, but I'm not sure from a business perspective that it would make a lot of sense. Been proven wrong hundreds of times in the last 4 years on this, and I look forward to seeing an option that could. Let's get to the investors on the platform. We look forward to having investors be able to qualify on the platform, and in the process of qualifying on our default standard deployment, when there is an offering that is a Reg CF offering on the platform, as the investor qualifies, they will self-accredit for which of these 4 different categories they fit into. But we're not going to ask them to try to know the law or figure out which of the four they fit into. They'll simply tell us, A, how much money their income is, what their net worth, what they estimate their net worth to be, and whether or not they've made other investments in a regulation crowdfunding environment in the last 12 months. And from that, we will calculate the eligibility of the individual investor and how much funds they have available to invest on the platform. They will then be, Craig has asked another great question about when the people will be able to start using this. And Rick, when is, we kind of jumped over that. The rules have been issued, but when will folks be able to start using them?
They were issued on October 29th of this year. They were published in the Federal Register on November 5th. They are eligible to be used 180 days after they are published in the Federal Register, which would bring us to May 4th, 2016. However, and we'll get into this in a few minutes, the funding portal, which is a new animal that acts as an intermediary, people will be able to start filing the applications with FINRA and the SEC to become a funding portal as of January 29th, 2016.
So that's go ahead, Craig. Rick, can you hear Craig when he's asking questions?
I cannot.
Yeah, me either. So let's assume that folks can't hear them either. And Frank, if you could put up the question window, I'll read them and ask them as well. So Rick, real quickly then, that brings us to our next point, that transactions have to be conducted through either a intermediary or a broker-dealer. Tell us a little about this new category of intermediary and the requirement of using one.
Correct. An issuer cannot use this directly. It has to be handled through an intermediary. An intermediary is either going to be a broker-dealer who has existed under the law since 1934, or a funding portal, which is a new animal, which Joseph refers to as a broker-dealer light. It actually is a broker-dealer, but qualifies as a funding portal under less stringent rules. Let's go to the next slide, because we'll get into what a funding portal is. Funding portal, as I said, is a broker-dealer. It must register both with the SEC on something called a form funding portal, and it has to register with FINRA. Joseph, are we going to, at CommunityLeader, have the ability to have people qualify and file a form funding portal and basically do what I call a funding portal in a box?
You bet. So initially, we will be working with a select group of pre-qualified clients, and we will work with them every step of the way for that portal, that funding portal, to become registered with FINRA and the SEC. So the most painful way, Michael, of doing that will be as one of our clients, where we will walk through every step of the way with clients to do that. Later on, it will be an automated process through our client onboarding. You'll be able to register as a funding portal. So the key distinction here is that currently, in order to participate in transaction-based fees, in order to be paid for selling a security, you needed to be a fully FINRA licensed broker-dealer. And with regulation crowdfunding, you'll be able to be a funding portal and participate in that transaction-based fee, but a funding portal will also need to register with the SEC and FINRA. And that's why I call it a broker-dealer light, because you still need to be registered, but you're not going to have to go through all of the same requirements of a full broker-dealer.
One of the questions that when crowdfunding statute first came out in April of 2012, it appeared that funding portals could not receive transaction-based compensation. That is not true. They can make a living. They can make transaction-based compensation. Of course, it will have to be disclosed. And the interesting part was that they are permitted to participate in the same securities that the issuer is issuing to investors. In other words, they're able to take stock, common stock, preferred stock, limited liability company interest, limited partnership interest as compensation, so long as it's in connection with the sale of the securities. That is something that's new, and it allows the funding portal to be on even footing with all broker-dealers. A funding portal, however, cannot offer investment advice, solicit securities, handle securities or funds, or pay transaction-based compensation. They can receive it, but they cannot pay it. Also, there's only one intermediary that is permitted per an offering. So an issuer can't go out there and shop a couple of the intermediaries and say, I'm going to put my securities and do the offer and sale on multiple intermediary platforms. They have to choose one. That doesn't mean that you can't use different broker-dealers and other platforms. What they would have to do is enter into a written contract with the intermediary that has it on its platform, and then they can pay those people transaction-based compensation. So you can have basically a syndicate, if you want, of intermediaries.
And what's fantastic, Rick, about our platform, the CommunityLeader platform, is that we have already built out the incredible technology infrastructure that's required to manage syndicated networks among and between portals. So our clients will be able to sign selling agreements and manage those selling agreements initially with other portals that are operating on our platform. And that's going to be huge in the crowdfunding space, especially for crowdfunding portals that would like to also work with registered broker-dealers. And then in a phase 2 deployment in the middle of next year, you'll be able to you'll be able to syndicate with broker-dealers and portals that are not using CommunityLeader's platform, but are willing to do the proper due diligence, document, and investor transparency.
Okay. One of the other requirements for a funding portal or intermediary, they have to educate investors upon opening the account. It can be a video, it could be a Q&A, but it must address the risks of Reg CF, the liquidity of the securities, the resale restrictions, and how to subscribe and cancel a subscription. Joseph, I would imagine the platform will handle all of those through the software and services of CommunityLeader.
Absolutely. So the front-end portals, the marketing sites in front of the registration gateway of the investor will be built out to include educational material as provided by our clients, and we'll have syndicated educational material available as well. Then inside the platform, inside the investor experience and UI, there'll be educational resources with the ability for the portal operator to track which of those resources an individual investor has or has not consumed. And then there will be the option of having some type of quiz or test that the investor can take as part of the qualification process. This will provide the portal operator and the issuers a documented audit trail that they met the education requirement.
Wonderful. When an investor does get directed to the platform and signs up on the platform, at that particular time, some fees have to be disclosed. One is the intermediary fees, and the other are promoters' fees. There are people out there that don't have a platform that have access to issuers. And if they refer an issuer to an intermediary, they can be compensated. However, they have to be disclosed upon signing up that they are being compensated. So that's a new feature that includes the compensation of promoters who promote issuers to an intermediary. Joseph, are we to be able to handle aspects of that on the platform?
We're already doing it. We have referral, tracking, management, source control, and referral payment happening on platforms today.
Can you guys hear me now?
Oh my gosh, yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, what do you know? I somehow solved my own technological problems.
You're brilliant.
Sorry about that, everyone.
It's nice on a technology company that you can figure it out. The last thing, one of the other things that an intermediary has to do is do a fraud check. So basically, they're going to be doing bad actor checks on the officers, directors, and the issuer itself. Joseph, will we be also providing that service?
Yep, through our crowd compliance platform, which is integrated into the platform today, doing bad actor checks and doing investor verification and doing OFAC and AML checks. We will be adding the bad actor compliance checks for issuers associated with regulation crowdfunding. Part of CommunityLeader's core value proposition is that all of these different services are integrated through one interface, so you won't have to maintain separate APIs and separate relationships for all of these essential services.
Next page, please.
And you know, one question that did come up I didn't have a chance to ask earlier was they're interested in the most painless way to register a funding portal, not a broker, with FINRA and SEC. What's the easiest, most painless way to do that?
Call me and be one of the initial clients of CommunityLeader, where we will be doing and coordinating the registration in February and March as part of a total package. There is a simple form that is already available for the FINRA and SEC registrations. It's circulating. Many of the questions that you'll be asked on that will directly relate to how you're trying to accomplish the requirements, and you'll need the information from a software service provider like CommunityLeader in order to successfully complete the registration process.
Great, thank you.
As we continue, the intermediary will be filing on behalf of an issuer with the SEC the Form C, which is equivalent to a private placement memorandum in a Reg D world. We'll be filing that, and we'll get into what a Form C contains. Essentially, what they have to do is file it and wait 21 days before you can close a particular transaction. However, during that 21-day cooling off period, the intermediary can receive money on behalf of a particular issuer. During that 21-day period, the SEC is not vetting out the investment, is not reviewing the Form C that's filed. It's just a 21-day cooling off period. So you don't have to worry about them scrutinizing the particular transaction. Joseph, are we going to be able to file this to the platform?
Yep. So initially, it'll be a download and upload into the SEC database. Eventually, we're working with a provider so that it'll be automatically generated. As the issuer fills out the basic information through the issuer application on our platform, they will be completing the information that will be required for a Form C filing. The offerings will be able to then go live either in a promotional setting or a live setting, a live published state, and then we'll collect the money, put it into an escrow through our CrowdPay system, and be all ready to go. It will then do the subsequent follow-up workflow of asking all of the investors to reconfirm and countersign the documents and all of that. But our platform's ready to go for that aspect.
Wonderful. As far as the offering is concerned, an issuer on the platform or through an intermediary can do a minimum maximum offering. They're absolutely permitted. Before an offering closes, however, the intermediary must provide a five-day notice to close. After that 5-day notice to close has been emailed or transmitted to all of the investors in a particular transaction, they have the ability to rescind up to 48 hours before the closing date. The price per share can be a fixed price or a formula, so long as in that 5-day notice to close, the actual price is disclosed. Green shoes or oversubscriptions will be permitted, so long as the intermediary, on behalf of the issuer, states how oversubscriptions will be handled. So either they'll be handled on a first-come, first-served basis on the subscription, or they would be handled as a pro rata as to the total offering. So in other words, if you have a $300,000 offering and you get oversubscriptions of $100,000, you can basically take that if you want, or you can allocate it. So it's something that didn't exist before.
So green shoe processing is actually a pretty complicated process. We're not sure how this is going to evolve in the market yet. We've set up an offline way for our clients to do it and to coordinate the green shoe, and then to provide a specific allocation of securities to each investor in the countersigning of the subscription document. So that feature is already built and is already being used on many of our platforms. We will actually, we are looking at how to automate that process, but we're going to stall for a little while on that and wait and see what actually happens in the marketplace. We're really focused on how much oversubscription will be required to offset the number of investors that choose to bow out at the final close, and what that ratio is going to be like. So we're ready to go on the green shoe oversubscription permitting right now.
The next thing on our list is compliance with investor limitation rules, which we already discussed. The privacy rights will have to be published on the site. No investor wants to have their information disseminated throughout, so there's privacy rights. Big question that's arisen and a lot of chatter that's gone through the professional community has to do with the prohibition on payments for leads. Can an intermediary pay for investor leads, get the names of investors? What the SEC has said, they can pay a flat fee for the leads, but they cannot buy the identifiable information. That would be the phone numbers, addresses, things like that. Joseph, you've been dealing with a lot of people in the industry on this particular question. What have you gleaned?
What I've gleaned is that this probably is the least thought through component of the regulation crowdfunding as it relates to how the real world operations happen. There's little possible way of purchasing leads without receiving identifiable information. So for example, if I, as currently defined, identifiable information. So for example, if I have a medical portal and I'm focusing on recruiting investors with a medical background, I could go to a list company and ask them to filter by medical profession. Unfortunately, then I couldn't pay for that lead list because it inherently included the identifiable information that they were a medical practitioner. So there's a lot of questions about that. We're looking at different ways of doing that in the platform. The most conservative model is our Nuclei marketing team is looking at how to integrate the purchase leads by an individual rather than the intermediary to support their individual raise, thus making it so that the intermediary is not doing it. But clearly this is going to be one of the areas. It also relates to, for example, pay-per-click advertising. It relates to single sign-on from your Google account, how much Google information can transfer over. So there's just a whole bunch of things on this prohibition for payment, prohibition for the payment of leads that is really going to get fleshed out over the next 6 months. And I think that community leaders are going to stay on top of it. We'll be nimble, and we'll allow our portals to go as far into that as they feel comfortable.
Okay. Moving on, there is a rule that says an intermediary cannot have a financial interest in one of the issuers, with the exception that they can receive, as we mentioned before, transaction-based income in the form of securities, so long as those securities are exactly the same securities being purchased by the investor. And we've discussed that. One other key part is there's no fidelity bond required, and that is a differentiation from broker-dealers who are required to have fidelity bonds. Next slide.
Hey, a quick question, referring back to Joseph's comments earlier about organic natural traffic that arrives on the site.
Well, I'm really surprised that we got that question from somebody in California. I expected the organic natural traffic questions to come from Washington and Colorado. just kidding. So organic natural traffic is going to be absolutely fine. The search engine optimization is built into our platform. Right now we get great feedback from folks that know that our portals that are operating are getting great search engine optimization as they use the platform, and we're feeling pretty good about that. So lots of organic natural traffic will be great. Got to tell you, we've worked in this space now for 5 years as the software company that builds portals for portal operators. We're not a portal, we're not running a portal, but because we're a software company that builds portals for portal operators, we are working with a lot of different portal clients. And the clients that count on organic natural traffic to drive investors have been sorely disappointed by the actual flow. There really does need to be aggressive, outbound marketing and advertising in order to build a relationship with the investors that result in a conversion to being investors. Rick, is there any, in the Reg A requirements, they said that the company had to be in the U.S. or Canada. Are there any rules about either non-U.S. based issuers, or more importantly, any specific rules about non-U.S. based foreign investors' participation in a regulation crowdfunding?
Well, the investors can participate, but the issuers have to be U.S. based.
So foreign investors can participate in the same rules and requirements, but the issuer has to be based in the United States. And because they're not allowing special purpose investment vehicles, you can't create a derivative company in the United States with the sole purpose of turning that money around and investing in a factory in Mexico. Is that correct?
That is true, and we'll get into that in a couple of slides from now in more detail. This next slide, it deals with funding portal safe harbor activities. One of the major issues that was being discussed in the last couple of years was the prohibition of a intermediary to recommend particular securities. And many comments were made to the SEC that said certain activities had to be permitted by the intermediary. Fortunately, in the regulations, there are certain things that an intermediary can do now. One is they can determine under what terms to allow an issuer to offer sell securities. The intermediary is actually given some discretion. They don't have to accept everybody. They cannot promote an issuer still, but they can highlight an offer or a facet of it. They can do that by disclosing criteria. The criteria would include such things as geographic location, type of securities offering, the industry. They're allowed to publish the number of commitments for a particular issuer as he conducts his offering, say how close they're getting to the target offering. They can highlight certain business industries and locations. For instance, if a particular intermediary just wants to sell life science type company securities for life science type companies, it will be able to do so. So it will be able to use its discretion and basically become a intermediary for a particular industry or particular segment. They also will be able to highlight certain issuers in the offerings. And as the particular offerings go along, they'll be able to publish on the site the number of investment commitments and show how the progress is toward a targeting amount of a raise. Very much like when you see the Red Cross and you see the little thermometer that shows how far and how close they are to getting to it, they'll be able to do things like that. Also, to the people who are on the platform or registered as potential investors, they will be able to email certain search functions, like the number of days to closing of an offering, the percentage of the targeted offering, the geographic proximity, the industry. So as you see, they will not be prohibited from offering a significant amount of information about issuers. All these communications, however, must be online. There was some chatter and talk about a independent webinar or seminar being held by a CEO of a particular issue who's doing a Reg CF offering. That is not permitted. No seminars, no meetings offline. All communications concerning an offering will have to be online. Also, an issuer will have to have a website so that the intermediary can refer to that particular website. And an intermediary has the ability to generally advertise its existence through multiple media. So they can do it through search engine optimization, social media sites, emails to potential customers, or they can publish it in a magazine, a newspaper, to basically direct traffic. Any comments on this, Joseph?
You bet. Lots of work here, lots of activity. The platform has a built-in CRM called CrowdIRM to help facilitate this in a compliant way. It's critically important that compliance with this all activity happening online will be a requirement, and auditing and transparency of that from our reporting and compliance features will be very, very important. You know, broker-dealers have a long experience of making sure that every email they send out is recorded and archived, as do you, Rick, as an attorney. And the online portals are going to need to recognize that all of their communication happens online so that it can be recorded, audited, and available, you know, for compliance purposes.
Wonderful. So moving on to the next slide. Something that was not required by the statute, but the SEC, in its wisdom in the regulations, will require it. They're going to require a communication channel or a blog so that particular investors can basically communicate with other investors, other promoters, and the issuer as to the efficacy of a particular issue. This is something, again, that had not been used before. It's referred to as the wisdom of the crowd. Joseph, are we to be able to have a blog on ours?
You bet. We have blogs today. The clients can use them today for two-way iterative communication. It records all of the communication and also provides transparency to representatives of the issuer and the portal operator, an association of who those folks are. We have had limited use of it in the Reg D world. It raises lots of complications, we believe, but we look forward to working with our clients on the proper management of those in the new regulation crowdfunding space.
A couple, it will be we can cover it later, but right now, since we're talking about the blog, it should be constructed so anybody can view the blog. You don't have to be on the platform of an intermediary to view it. However, to participate in the blog, you must have registered on the intermediary site. So then you can participate and put your 2 cents into it. If a promoter or somebody representing the issuer, an officer, director, participates, must identify himself as such if he happens to make any comments or respond to anything that's on the blog. And if a promoter is on there talking about a particular issuer, he will have to disclose that he's being compensated. The intermediary, continuing on, of course, is going to advise issuers on how to fill out the Form C, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. All compensation arrangements will have to be disclosed, and we talked about that somewhat between the intermediary and other broker-dealers and other intermediaries. The only caveat is it must be in a written agreement, and we've discussed that already. And we've discussed the advertising already. So let's move on to the next slide. Are there any questions?
So, yeah, Rick, I've got a question. So are all the investors, are they equity in nature, or can there be loans?
This deal, crowdfunding deals with securities. So securities can be every type of ownership interest, preferred stock, common stock, LLC membership interest, can also be debt securities. So you could be loans, you know, undivided interest in notes, things such as that. So
it could also be royalties on future sales of an album in the entertainment space. Anytime there's a promise of a return, it's a security, and regulation crowdfunding covers all those different types of securities.
On the next slide,
there's another, Rick, there's another quick question here that I want to tell you so that you can weave it in to your discussion here, which is what type of curation is required to be done by the platforms when they're putting deals up on the platform?
Well, obviously, under FINRA rules and regulations, you do have to do your due diligence on a particular issuer. Because there are fraud rules, and we'll get into the fraud rules, but essentially an intermediary can be now charged with fraud. And before, we had something called the central bank case that said ancillary participants in an offering could not be held to aid and abet in securities fraud. And what they said is you had to be a participant in the fraud. Now, basically saying, if you don't discover the fraud or discover information about this, and there is a fraud, you might be held to accountable on the same level as an issuer for securities fraud, which is a change from current law. So yes, I will recommend that an intermediary does do its fraud check with the bad actor check and probably do a Google search. They're not going to have to go so far as to be able to spend lots of money to discover particular fraud. They're going to have to do certain bare minimums. Does that answer it?
Yep, and we can talk more about that. Let's keep moving along.
Okay, the next part of it is what CommunityLeader is going to be able to do. This offering memorandum on Form C, which is an XML-based populated form. We won't go into specific requirements. It's attached in the regulation, crowdfunding. However, it will be populated. Joseph, will we be able to, on CommunityLeader's software and services, populate and file the Form C?
Initially, we'll populate and provide this form for filing, and in future upgrades, it'll automate the filing as well.
Okay, as far as trying to solicit initial investors, the SEC has provided regulations and rules and regulations on how to do that. And basically, they've said when trying to attract investors, you can advertise on the internet and social media in a tombstone format. The tombstone ad is not limited to internet and social media, but if it is in a print media or radio, it must refer to a link to the intermediary site. The advertisement must state that you're conducting an offering through an intermediary with a link to the intermediary's website, set forth the terms of the offering and the factual information about the legal identity and business location of the issuer of the website, and provide the email of the representative of the issuer. The terms of the offering that can be published in this basically email blast and social media blast is the amount of the securities offer, the nature of the securities, the price of the securities, and the closing date. We refer to this as a tombstone. Joseph, will we be able to assist issuers in advertising for a particular issuance?
Absolutely. So the platform currently auto-generates the tombstones for marketing purposes for issuers on the platform. There will be a specific template for tombstones associated with the regulation crowdfunding. So as the issuer registers on the platform and is completing the information for posting on the platform, completing the information for filing the Form C, they will be concurrently making the tombstones in the appropriate format for marketing and advertising support.
Wonderful. Reg CF is not available to blank check companies, special purpose vehicles, investment companies, or hedge funds. So in other words, like a blank check company, if someone says, I want to raise money in order to buy a company yet to be identified, cannot do it. SPVs, you cannot do derivative ownership, which is a key issue. A lot of companies don't want to have 100 investors. And what they would normally like to do is put them all into a special purpose vehicle, which is usually an LLC, and that LLC would be a single investor into the issuer. That's not permitted in this particular case, though that can be addressed in certain ways. So just note that there's a limitation as to who the issuer can be. There are compensation rules for promoters, officers, and directors. Obviously, they must be through the intermediary after the offering is made. There will be annual filings that are required within 120 days at the end of the fiscal year of a company that's on the platform. It'll have to be either generated through the website of the issuer or the intermediary's platform. It could be an email to investors directing them to look at the website or the platform. And these annual filings need not be audited, and that was the differentiation from the proposed rule. Joseph, are we going to be able to help with the dissemination of the annual filings?
Oh, you know, that's one of the most beautiful things about our platform in general, is that the issuer will be able to upload their annual filing or fill out a form, you know, a Q&A type driven form in order to produce the annual filing, and it will automatically distribute to all of the investors. So all of the investors can receive an email or an in-app ping you know, on their mobile phone that their filings for their investment or investments are now available. So it's pretty exciting. That's part of the ability to scale. If you think about the complexities of the ongoing investor relations for companies that take advantage of regulation crowdfunding, the ability to distribute these filings through a platform is going to be essential.
Okay. Let's go on to the next slide. We've talked about blogs. You're allowed to use Reg CF in conjunction with donation and product crowdfunding, so you can have two similar raises going at the same time. The only problem, again, is we have to worry about the solicitation rules under Reg CF and to make sure whatever Kickstarter or Indiegogo or other type of product crowdfunding that's being used does not violate and cross-pollinate Reg CF. Joseph, are we going to be able to, like in our current platform for Reg D offerings, do the execution of subscription agreements and the escrow services and all of that?
All done, ready to go, actively being used every day on our platform to move millions of dollars. So on the escrow services, the investor AML, and OFAC and Patriot Act checks are being done. The execution of the subscription agreements, including support for custodial accounts like a self-directed IRA, built in, done, ready to go.
Next slide, please.
Hey, Rick, while we're going to the next slide, unaudited reports from independent CPAs, okay then?
We should go over the financial statements that are required in offerings. So that's a good point to bring up because we didn't hit it in one of the other slides. There are 3 levels of financial statements that have to be provided to investors. If there's an offering under $100,000, you have to have a statement that's acknowledged by the CEO of the company as to the gross revenues, the taxable income, and the taxes paid for the last 2 years. And that's it for anything under $100,000. From $100,000 up to $500,000, there have to be reviewed statements by an independent CPA. And to the extent that it's over $500,000 and of course up to $1 million, the financial statements provided have to be 2 years of audited statements with one caveat, and this is a differentiator from the original proposed regs, is that if this is the first Reg CF offering done by a particular issuer, they do not have to audit the statements if it's over $500,000 and less than $1 million. They'll just have to be reviewed statements. So that's a key thing.
So one of the key things that I'd like to pull out in that, Rick, that I often hear confusion on is it's not the amount of the individual raise, it's the amount of the consecutive raises using the exemption in the previous 12 months. So if you did $100,000 and just did the CEO, but then you did another $100,000, now you're going to need the reviewed financials from an independent CPA. And then if your next one is $300,001, taking you over the $500,000, then you're going to need the audited because it's A, not your first, and B, your aggregated amount went over 500.
Over a 12-month period, yes. Exactly. Let's move forward to the slide on restriction on resales. If an investor wants to resell, he's got a 1-year prohibition, which is very similar to Rule 144 dealing with non-listed stocks or pink sheet companies. However, a person is able to sell to family members, back to the issuer, or to accredited investors. And of course, the issuer has to set forth the restrictions on the back of the securities. The regulations preempt state law. What that means is the states cannot particularly regulate in this area other than to require what we call a notice filing, which basically says to a state and the residents of the state, we're doing an offering. They will not be able to do any kind of a review of the offering, and that's huge. So a lot of the states put up some flack over that. The SEC kept the state preemption in line. We mentioned something.
Can I just say, state preemption relates to the solicitation and sale of the security. It doesn't mean, as I've heard on other presentations from people who are soliciting solutions other than community leaders, that it preempts you from all of the state's rules regarding investors and stakeholders, or I mean shareholders of the company. Your company is still registered in a state and has legal obligations and requirements as an incorporated entity of that state. And if you're filing as a foreign company to do business in the state, you're going to have requirements there. So just because it's a preemption of state security rules doesn't mean that it's an exemption from the rest of corporate law. Thanks, Rick. Just had to plug that for a second.
No, that's a good point. I appreciate that. As far as when an investor sues for fraud right now, they have to show through their pleadings that the issuer knew of a particular falsehood or an omission of a material fact or a misstatement of material fact, and that they relied on it. And through the law that exists today, that's very difficult to get past the pleading requirement for a lawsuit. Under Reg CF, they have changed the scienter and reliance rules whereby the issuer now has to show it didn't have scienter and the investor didn't rely. So that's a change in things. However, what is an issuer going to do in this world to counteract securities fraud and make this a much more manageable? First, there is a particular exemption from registration under the 34 Act as a public company based upon the number of investors. Investors that come under Reg CF are exempt from that computation. As far as the problem that we have to overcome with disallowing SPVs, we will see one of the ways to do that is through a voting trust. So when there's a subscription made for securities, the investors will assent to a voting trust, which means the investors will meet as beneficiaries of the voting trust. They will vote for certain aspects of the operation of the company, whether it's election of directors, a sale of the company. The majority will vote as a whole through a trustee. That's the voting trust, so it basically herds all the cats, so to speak. We will see that in the subscription agreement, we'll probably have a clause that prohibits class action lawsuits, that mandates arbitration, and waives the jury.
So what's Rick's, I'm just going to jump on there. What Rick is talking about is that the actual documents an issuer uses to solicit the investment, the subscription agreement, their operating agreement, their buy-sell agreement, those are going to be templated on the intermediary's platform, and for standardization and transparency. And it is going to be critically important that those documents are produced in the context of how they're selling the security. And Rick just went into a lot of the nuances that we've researched and put together a compliance package, a package of compliant documents that the issuers could use. It is part of the comprehensive package that we provide clients when they contract with us to build, design, build, and support a Reg CF crowdfunding platform. We include those legal documents for you to be able to turn around and make available to your clients. There's been a lot of talk about how expensive it's going to be for companies to use this. And Rick, I don't know what numbers you're hearing, but I was reading a Forbes article where they said it was going to cost, between $8,000 and $15,000 for a company to be able to do this. And that's just, I think, wrong. And I think that using an automated platform like ours will enable you to pass on significant savings to clients and then leave yourself margin to run a really good business.
I've heard go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, please, I have another question from Mr. Jordan. Has a great question on here I want to get into. Go ahead.
All I was going to say that there are some law firms out there that are advertising $5,000 to $7,500 using a service like CommunityLeader that can populate your Form C, can go through and help the intermediary put together an entire issuer's filing, should substantially reduce the illegal fees that will be charged in one of these Reg CF offerings. Go ahead with the question.
Rick, while we have you as the attorney online, as opposed to me being the, I don't know what I am, the all-purpose biz dev guy, what do you see as the real liabilities for a funding portal provider? What's the legal exposure here, especially with Church versus SEC kind of taken away? What do you see as the liabilities? And then I'll address how our platform helps a portal provider address those liabilities.
Well, probably the number one will be the requirement that an intermediary do the fraud checks. But I believe that's more going to be an objective standard using certain search tools to see whether or not a particular issuer has, and its officers and directors, have bankruptcy filings, criminal convictions, things that really prohibit an issuer, an officer, and director in participating in an offering of securities. Maybe you'll go one step further with a Google search, but that essentially will be it. So that's one particular area. The other areas there are basically the requirements that an intermediary has, from the education, but again, a CommunityLeader platform can handle that.
Rick, let's just, we've got a little bit of time here. I thank everybody I know it was an hour, we started late. I know many of you need to go. I appreciate that. The entire, this is all recorded. It'll be available on our website. It's available on our Facebook site. You can contact us to get the download. Rick, but let's continue on this liability issue for a second. So, for example, one of my requirements is that the investors need to be fitting how much money they put in. What's my liability as a funding portal provider for that?
It's all self-accreditation. So what the net worth is, what the income is, and what your other investments and Reg CF offerings is all self-accreditation by an investor. And the standard is you can rely upon it unless you have reason to know. And when that reason to know is not subjective, it basically says, as an intermediary or a representative of the intermediary sits there today, is he aware of anything? So, of course, if he reads the Wall Street Journal on the front page, it says this issuer is now under indictment, that's something he might be held to look at. But other than that, there's no due diligence requirement to do a deep dive into the issuer or the officers and directors of the issuer.
Rick, let's think here for a worst-case scenario real quickly, and somebody chose not to use CommunityLeader software that had the built-in auditing of all of these different requirements, didn't have the built-in functionality of tracking all of the activity for reporting. Let's say that a funding portal launched and didn't have the education feature and didn't have an ability to track and report and document that the investors were properly educated. What's going to be their exposure or liability?
Well, what we do is we provide the checks and balances. We provide the analytics. So if an issuer doesn't use our software and services and is investigated by the SEC, FINRA, or a state securities commissioner for fraud, which they're allowed to look into it, by using CommunityLeader, you're going to have recorded right there the investor's experience on the website and what the intermediary had did vis-a-vis that particular investor. So not only do you have the audit trail, so to speak, to give to an investor, to a regulator, you have all the analytics that will be required. So if there is an investigation, sometimes the investigation will put an issuer out even if they're completely innocent. So this will circumvent the investigation. And on our site, when we met with the SEC and FINRA in regards to Reg D offerings, we actually told the SEC and FINRA, you can have a seat on our platform. And if you want to look at how offerings are being handled, you can look at it at any particular time. But if there is an investigation, within moments we can generate a seat on our platform for the commission, or a CD, or a PDF file that shows all the information.
You bet. So real quickly, I want to add to that. So the quick answer is that a funding portal that does it wrong will find itself in an investigation fairly quickly. The investigation will consume so much of their time that it'll probably put them out of business, just like it puts lots of small broker-dealers or even issuers out of business because of the consuming nature of it. Our platform has been designed to be compliant, to circumvent that type of investigation by making it very easy to print off all of the reports of compliance. I would like to add to that, though, that the funding portals have more beyond a legal liability. The critical issue for a funding portal is going to be their market reputation. It's going to be their relationship with the investors. It's going to be the quality of the deals and the quality of the ongoing support that they provide to the investors. If I buy something on Amazon.com and I don't like it, I call Amazon.com, even if it actually was sold from another store. If I buy something on eBay and I feel like I'm frauded, I contact eBay, even if I bought it directly from another seller. Intermediaries like Amazon and eBay have quickly learned that they have to own that primary relationship with their customer. And the funding portals are going to learn very quickly that they have to own the primary relationship with the investors and follow through and provide support and provide guidance. Because of that, they're going to want a platform like ours to ensure that they have the most effective, easy, compliant way of maintaining that relationship with the issuer for transparency to the investor, maintaining that relationship with the investor. There's a lot of these software platforms that have been designed by web people to be really fancy and bringing in investors, and that's beautiful. And some of them have done a good job of building transaction engines for selling the investment. What CommunityLeader's system of software and services that you can see on your screen is designed for all three stages: the solicitation, the sale, and the ongoing support. Unlike a lot of folks that see the celebration day as the day that the money is raised, we see the celebration day as the day that there's an exit by the investors. Because until that time, there will be an ongoing moral, ethical, and market responsibility by the funding portal to be involved and support that investor and that issuer. So the law is the foundation, and we have been built for the most compliant platform that you'll possibly find on the market. But we also recognize that these are living, breathing businesses that will need to be competitive in the marketplace. And our integrated software and service are designed and built for you as a portal operator to thrive on behalf of your issuers, thrive on behalf of your investors, and thrive on behalf of your communities as well. So the big news, of course, was that Title III of the Jobs Act has now been codified into regulation crowdfunding, and in 180 days, issuers will start to be able to use it at the end of January, portals will start to be able to make applications. As I'm sure you can expect, we're being flooded with portal operators who would like to use our software and service package. So I urge you to give us a call. If you're interested in using that package, connect with Frank or Craig or Molly or myself in our office. Get a scheduled demonstration. Let us figure out exactly what you're looking for so that we can get you on the list. We're going to have a small select group of portals for the first quarter of 2016 that we'll support so that we can ensure their success before we grow beyond that. So I'd love to have you on the list. Thanks for joining us. Any last words, Rick?
No, other than if you go to the last slide, there's email addresses both for Joseph and myself, and feel free to provide any further questions you have through email.
Great. Thank you so much, and I will stay online and we'll keep this up. I'll stay answering questions as long as people are asking them. Okay? Thanks so much, everybody.
Are you there? Joseph? Hello, is this Rick? Is this Rick? Hello?